I never thought I'd see my own son spit in my face. Not my boy. Not the kid I taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball. But there he was, his eyes cold with hate, a string of his saliva dripping down my cheek while his wife and mother-in-law sat there applauding like he'd just performed some brave act. I simply wiped my face, turned around and walked away. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My name is William Harrison. Most folks around Oak Ridge, Virginia, call me Bill. I'm 72 years old, and until recently, I spent my retirement days in a predictable rhythm that kept me sane after losing Margaret, my wife of 43 years, to cancer. I wake up at 5:30 every morning. Don't need an alarm clock anymore. My body just knows. First thing, I make coffee in the small kitchen of my modest ranch house, the one Margaret and I bought back in '83 when I got promoted at the manufacturing plant. My morning routine is simple but sacred. Coffee, toast with peanut butter, the crossword puzzle from yesterday's paper, because I like to save it for mornings. Then a walk around the neighborhood, 3 miles exactly. Rain or shine. The neighbors know me. Mrs. Daniels waves from her garden. Ted Barnes usually catches me at the corner and walks half a mile with me, talking about his grandkids or the weather. Simple pleasures. After lunch, usually a sandwich and soup I make in batches, I might work in my workshop behind the garage. Nothing fancy, just basic woodworking, birdhouses, small tables. A jewelry box once for my granddaughter Emma's 16th birthday. The sawdust and the smell of wood keeps my hands busy and my mind quiet. Dinner at 6, usually in front of the television watching the news or an old western. Bed by 9, a widower's life. Not exciting, but it was mine, and I was content enough. That was before everything changed. Before I realized how invisible I'd become to my own family, I'd always been the reliable one, the steady hand. When my son Michael was growing up, I never missed a baseball game or a school concert. Not one. Even when the plant had me working overtime, I'd swap shifts or go without sleep. Being there mattered more than comfort. Margaret used to say I was stubborn about it, but she smiled when she said it. "You're building something more important than furniture. Bill," she would tell me, watching me rush out the door to catch Michael's game after a 12-hour shift. "You're building trust." I believed that. I really did. When Michael met Stephanie in college, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. Margaret was still with us then, and we hosted their engagement party in our backyard. I remember building a special arbor for them to stand under. Spent 3 weekends on it, getting the curves just right. Made it from oak because I wanted it to last like their marriage. That arbor's still in my yard, weathered now but standing. When they had Emma, our first grandchild, I thought my heart would burst. I was 57 then, still working at the plant as a floor manager. I'd put in 32 years by that point. We started a college fund for Emma the day she was born, Margaret and me. $20 a week, every week, no exceptions. Even when money got tight, that money went into Emma's future. After Jacob came along 3 years later, we started another fund. By then, Margaret's health was beginning to slip, but she insisted. "Our grandchildren's education comes first, Bill," she'd say, marking the calendar with deposit dates. Even when the medical bills started stacking up, those 2 funds were untouchable. Margaret's battle with cancer lasted 18 months. Brutal months of watching the strongest woman I'd ever known fade away piece by piece. Michael and Stephanie helped when they could, but they had young children, careers just taking off. I understood. I was the one who sat by Margaret's hospital bed, learned to change her IV bags, memorized her medication schedule better than the nurses. The night she died, I held her hand until it went cold. Michael arrived 30 minutes after she was gone. He'd been stuck in traffic, he said. I never held it against him. How could I? He was losing his mother. But sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wondered if he knew what it meant that I was there and he wasn't, what it cost me to be the one watching her final breath. After the funeral, the house felt enormous. Too big for one person. Too quiet. I'd wake up reaching for Margaret, my hand finding only cold sheets. Those first months I thought about selling the place, getting an apartment closer to Michael and his family. But this was our home. The home where we'd raised our son, hosted Christmas dinners, celebrated anniversaries. The home where Margaret had planted rose bushes that still bloomed every spring. I couldn't leave. Instead, I doubled down on being a grandfather. Every Saturday, I'd drive the 40 minutes to Michael and Stephanie's house in the suburbs. I'd bring treats for the kids, usually something I'd baked myself. Margaret had been the cook in the family, but I learned. YouTube videos became my cooking school. I mastered chocolate chip cookies first, then branched out to banana bread and apple pie. The kids loved it. I'd take Emma and Jacob fishing at the lake near my house, teaching them to bait hooks and cast lines just like I taught their father. We'd build model airplanes in my workshop, their small fingers struggling with the delicate parts while I guided them patiently. On rainy days, we'd play board games or watch old movies that I thought they should know. Grandpa's old school cool, Emma told her friends once. I overheard it when I was picking her up from soccer practice. It meant more to me than she could know. For 5 years after Margaret died, that was my life. Quiet days alone. Weekends with my grandkids, monthly dinners at Michael's where I'd bring a homemade pie or casserole. Not perfect, but it was a life. I was needed. I mattered. Then came Stephanie's mother, Diane. Her husband left her for a younger woman, a tale as old as time. She needed a place to stay while she figured things out. Michael and Stephanie offered their guest room. Temporary, they said, just until she found her footing. I met Diane at Sunday dinner the week after she moved in. She was younger than me, maybe early 60s, with dyed blonde hair and the kind of tan that comes from a salon. Not honest work in the sun. She had sharp eyes that seemed to measure everything. The house, the furniture, the food on her plate. "So you live all alone in that big house?" she asked me over dessert, her voice carrying a note of something I couldn't quite place. "Pity, maybe, or calculation. It's not that big," I said, cutting into the apple crumble I'd brought. "And it's home. Must be so lonely," she pressed, looking around the table as if seeking agreement. "At our age, isolation is the silent killer." "Dad's not isolated," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "For he has his routines, his friends." Diane hummed, unconvinced. "Well, if you ever decide to downsize, I know a wonderful realtor. Specializes in helping seniors transition." Something in her tone made me grip my fork tighter. Seniors. Like I was some category of person, not an individual. "I'm fine where I am," I said firmly, "but thank you for your concern." The conversation moved on, but something had shifted. A seed had been planted. The next Saturday, when I arrived with my usual box of homemade cookies, Emma and Jacob were gone. "Soccer tournament," Stephanie explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Last-minute thing." But Emma's soccer schedule had been on the refrigerator the week before. I'd noticed it specifically because I was planning to attend her next game. "Will they be back for dinner?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Probably not," Michael said, taking the cookie box from my hands. "They're going out with the team after. Team bonding." I stood in their kitchen, suddenly awkward, a visitor rather than family. "Well," I said, forcing brightness into my voice, "maybe we could still have lunch together. I brought those cookies the kids like, but we adults could enjoy them too." Michael and Stephanie exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "Actually, Dad," Michael began, his voice taking on that careful tone people use when delivering bad news, "we were just heading out. Diane has an appointment with her financial advisor, and we're going to sit in. Help her sort things out." "I see." And I did. I saw exactly what was happening, though I wasn't ready to admit it to myself yet. "Rain check," Stephanie offered, already reaching for her purse. "Next weekend will be better." As I drove home, the box of cookies beside me in the passenger seat, where Margaret used to sit, I felt the first real pangs of what was coming. The slow, deliberate distance, the gradual pushing away. I'd seen it happen to other men my age, friends whose children suddenly had no time for them, whose grandchildren became increasingly unavailable. I told myself I was being paranoid. Families get busy. Schedules conflict. It wasn't personal, but the next weekend Emma had a sleepover. Jacob had a science project. Michael and Stephanie had dinner plans with friends. The weekend after that, they didn't even bother with excuses. Just didn't answer my calls until Sunday evening, when Michael texted, "Sorry, crazy weekend. Talk soon." By the fourth weekend, I stopped calling. I sat in my workshop instead, sanding a small jewelry box I'd been making for Emma's next birthday, wondering if she'd ever receive it. Then came the invitation. Hand-delivered by Michael on a Tuesday afternoon, surprising me in my workshop, where I was putting the finishing touches on a birdhouse. "Dad," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, looking out of place in his business casual clothes among my tools and wood scraps. "Got a minute?" "For you." "Always." I set down my sandpaper, wiped my hands on my apron. "Everything okay?" He shifted his weight, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah, everything's fine." "Great, actually." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "We wanted to invite you to dinner this Saturday. Something special." I took the envelope, trying to contain my surprise and, if I'm honest, my joy. After weeks of silence and invitation, maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe it had just been a busy period, nothing more. "I'd love to come," I said, not even opening the envelope. "Should I bring anything?" "I could make that cherry pie the kids—" "No," Michael interrupted too quickly. "No, nothing like that. It's a formal dinner. Stephanie's handling everything." Something in his tone gave me pause. "Formal? What's the occasion?" He looked at his watch, a nervous habit he'd had since high school. "It's all in the invitation." "I've got to run. Conference call in 20 minutes. But we'll see you Saturday, right? 6 o'clock sharp." Before I could ask any more questions, he was gone, leaving me standing in my workshop with the envelope in my hand, sawdust dancing in the afternoon light streaming through the window. I opened it carefully. Inside was a cream-colored card with elegant script. "You are cordially invited to celebrate a new beginning Saturday, 6 o'clock p.m. Formal attire requested, no explanation. No details about what new beginning we were celebrating. Just an address, Michael and Stephanie's house, and a time. I placed the invitation on my workbench and stared at it. Something felt off. In all the years I'd known him, Michael had never used phrases like cordially invited or formal attire. This had Diane written all over it. Still, it was the first contact in weeks. Maybe it was an olive branch. Maybe they'd realized how they'd been treating me and wanted to make amends. I decided to go with an open heart, pushing down the unease that had settled in my stomach. That Saturday, I pulled my old suit from the back of the closet, the one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral and hadn't touched since. It hung looser on me now. I'd lost weight in the past few months, not really noticing until the belt needed an extra notch. I polished my shoes, put on the tie Margaret had given me for our 40th anniversary, and combed what was left of my hair. Looking in the mirror, I saw an old man trying too hard. But I also saw a father and grandfather who wasn't ready to be discarded. I drove to Michael's house with a mix of hope and apprehension, the invitation sitting on the passenger seat where the cookies had been weeks before. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed several cars I didn't recognize. A dinner party then. Not just family. Stephanie answered the door, dressed in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. "Bill," she said, using my first name instead of Dad for the first time in 20 years. Right on time. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She stepped back to let me in, and I immediately sensed the atmosphere, tense, formal, nothing like the warm family dinners we used to share. The living room had been transformed. The comfortable furniture had been rearranged to create a more formal seating area. A bar had been set up in one corner, where a man in a vest was mixing drinks. About 15 people stood in small groups, all holding wine glasses, all dressed in evening wear that made my old suit look shabby by comparison. I recognized a few faces, neighbors, some of Michael's work colleagues. But most were strangers to me. Diane stood at the center of the largest group, resplendent in a blue dress that looked expensive, holding court like this was her home, not my son's. Michael approached, a forced smile on his face. "Dad, you made it. Can I get you a drink?" "Just water for now," I said, still taking in the scene. "Michael, what exactly are we celebrating?" Before he could answer, Diane clapped her hands for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her. "Everyone, please take your seats," she announced. "Dinner is about to be served, and we have a special announcement to make." Michael guided me to the dining room, where the table had been extended to its full length and set with china I'd never seen before. Place cards directed everyone to assigned seats. Mine was at the far end, as distant from Michael and Stephanie as possible between two strangers. As we settled in, servers, actual hired servers in my son's house, began bringing out the first course. Diane stood at the head of the table, wine glass raised. "Before we begin this wonderful meal," she said, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who had rehearsed, "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate this special occasion." My heart sank. Whatever was happening, I clearly wasn't part of the inner circle that knew about it in advance. As many of you know, Diane continued, the past year has been one of transition for me. Losing my marriage after 30 years was devastating. She paused, allowing sympathetic murmurs to ripple around the table. But as they say, when God closes a door, he opens a window. She gestured to Stephanie and Michael. My daughter and son-in-law have been my rocks. And now I'm thrilled to announce that we're making our arrangement permanent. I froze. Fork halfway to my mouth. Michael and Stephanie have invited me to live with them permanently, and we've decided to formalize our living arrangement by purchasing a new home. Together, a 3-generation household where I can help with the children, and we can all support each other as family should. The table erupted in applause. I set down my fork, my appetite gone. We've already found the perfect property, Diane continued, practically glowing. 5 bedrooms, a modern kitchen for Stephanie, a home office for Michael, and a beautiful garden for me to tend in my retirement. More applause. Michael and Stephanie smiled, but neither looked in my direction. We close escrow next month, Diane finished triumphantly. To new beginnings. Everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine mechanically, my mind racing. A new home. 3 generations. Diane, not me. I was being replaced, written out of the family narrative so completely they hadn't even thought to mention it to me before announcing it to a room full of near strangers. Throughout dinner, conversations swirled around the new house, the arrangements, the neighborhood. I sat silent, picking at food I couldn't taste, nodding politely when the woman beside me asked if I was Michael's father. Yes, I said simply. His father. How wonderful that you could be here for this celebration, she said, clearly having no idea of the significance. Family is everything, isn't it? I managed a tight smile. Indeed it is. After dinner, while dessert was being prepared, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I found myself walking down the hallway to the children's rooms. Emma's door was decorated with soccer ribbons and band stickers. Jacob's with superhero emblems. I wondered if they knew about the move, about Diane taking the role that should have been mine. I continued past their rooms to the guest room, Diane's room now. The door was ajar and curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open slightly and peered inside. The transformation was complete. No trace remained of the guest room I'd occasionally used when visits ran late. Diane's clothes filled the closet, her makeup and perfumes covered the dresser, and on the nightstand sat a framed photo of Stephanie, Michael, and the kids, with Diane in the center. No empty space where I might have stood. No acknowledgement that there was another grandparent in the picture. Can I help you with something? I turned to find Diane standing in the hallway, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Just looking for the bathroom, I lied, knowing she didn't believe me. It's the other direction, she said coolly. This is my private space. I nodded, stepping away from the door. Congratulations on your new arrangement. Something flickered across her face. Satisfaction, perhaps. Or triumph. Thank you, Bill. I know it must be difficult being alone in that big house while we create a proper family unit here. The words stung precisely as they were meant to. A proper family unit. As if what I had offered, my love, my presence, my devotion to my grandchildren, had been somehow improper or insufficient. My family has never had complaints before, I said quietly. Diane's smile tightened. Times change. Children need stability, routine, a grandmother's touch, and a grandfather's, I asked. She shrugged, the gesture dismissive. You're welcome to visit, of course. Once we're settled, though it will be quite a drive from your place to the new house, nearly an hour each way. The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd written it out. I was being positioned as the distant relative, the occasional visitor, while she claimed the daily intimacy of family life. I see. And I did, finally, completely. I walked past her, back toward the dining room where everyone was gathering for dessert and coffee. Michael caught my eye as I entered, perhaps noticing something in my expression. Everything okay, Dad? He asked, his voice low. When were you going to tell me? I asked simply. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. We've been meaning to. It just happened quickly. Diane's financial advisor suggested combining resources, and it made sense for everyone. Everyone except me, I said. Michael glanced around, clearly not wanting to have this conversation in front of guests. We can talk about this later. When? After you've moved. After the kids have forgotten what my workshop smells like. Dad, you're overreacting. Nothing has to change between us, but everything had already changed. I could feel it, see it in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, in the careful distance Stephanie maintained across the room. I should go, I said, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. Congratulate Stephanie for me on the new house. At least stay for dessert, Michael said, but his tone suggested he was merely being polite. No, I think I've had my fill. I turned to leave, then paused. The jewelry box I've been making for Emma's birthday is almost finished. I'll drop it by before you move. I walked out before he could respond, before anyone could notice the old man leaving early. In the driveway, I sat in my car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting back emotions I hadn't felt since Margaret died. I'd been replaced, erased, and the worst part was how efficiently it had been done. How completely I'd been maneuvered to the margins of my own family's life. As I drove home to my empty house, I made a decision. If they wanted me gone, I would go, but on my terms, not theirs. I wouldn't fade away like a ghost, wouldn't become the pathetic old grandfather begging for scraps of attention. Margaret wouldn't have wanted that for me. She would have expected better, demanded better. I pulled into my driveway, looking at the house where we'd built our life together. The porch light I'd left on glowed in the darkness, welcoming me home to emptiness. But maybe emptiness was better than false welcome, than performative inclusion. Tomorrow I would call my old friend Richard, who had moved to Arizona after his wife died. He'd been inviting me to visit, to see the desert, to consider relocating. I'd always declined, tied to this place by family obligations that now seemed painfully one-sided. Maybe it was time for my own new beginning. I slept poorly that night, tossing and turning in the bed that still felt too big without Margaret. When morning came, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my phone staring at Richard's number. It was early, barely 7 a.m., but Richard had always been an early riser like me. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. Bill Harrison, to what do I owe this Sunday morning miracle? How's Arizona treating you? I asked, avoiding the real reason for my call. Like a king. 82 degrees yesterday, sunshine every day. My arthritis barely knows it exists anymore, he chuckled. But you didn't call to hear about the weather. What's going on? I took a deep breath. That offer to visit still open? There was a brief silence. Richard and I had been friends for nearly 40 years. He knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. Always open, he said finally. Guest rooms made up. Question is, why now? Last time we talked, you couldn't be dragged away from those grandkids of yours. The words stuck in my throat. Admitting what had happened meant accepting it. Things change, I managed. People change. Richard was quiet for a moment. Michael? It's complicated. It always is with family. His voice softened. Listen, come out for 2 weeks. No pressure, no commitments. Just a change of scenery. The desert has a way of clearing your head. We made arrangements for the following weekend. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. For the first time in my adult life, I was planning to leave without considering anyone else's needs or schedule. No checking with Michael. No coordinating with the grandkids' activities. Just me making a decision for myself. It felt both liberating and terribly lonely. Monday morning, I called my doctor's office to refill prescriptions, explaining I'd be traveling. The receptionist, Doris, who'd known Margaret and me for years, asked about the trip with genuine interest. Arizona? That's wonderful, Bill. Family out there. Just an old friend, I said. Well, it'll be good for you to get away, Doris said warmly. You've been cooped up in that house too long. Margaret would approve, would she? I wondered. Margaret had been the one who insisted we stay close to Michael after he married, even turning down a chance to travel to Europe because Emma was due that summer. Family first always, but what happens when family doesn't put you first anymore? Wednesday morning, as I was checking flight prices, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Hello? Dad. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk about Saturday night. Nothing to talk about, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You're making changes. I understand. Do you? Because walking out in the middle of dinner didn't seem like understanding. I felt heat rising in my neck. I wasn't aware I needed to stay for the entire celebration of my replacement. That's not... He sighed heavily. Look, we're not replacing you. The new house has a guest suite. You could visit any time, even stay for extended periods. A guest, I repeated. In my own family's home. That's not what I meant, but it was exactly what he meant, whether he realized it or not. I was being categorized, filed away as elderly parent to be accommodated occasionally, not an integral part of daily life. Michael, I'm tired, I said. I've booked a trip to visit Richard in Arizona. I'm leaving Saturday. What? For how long? 2 weeks. Maybe more. Silence stretched between us. Then this is about Diane, isn't it? This is about me needing space, I said carefully. To think about what comes next. What's that supposed to mean? I couldn't explain what I didn't fully understand myself. It means I'm 72 years old, and I'm figuring out what I want the rest of my life to look like. Without us. His voice had an edge now. You seem to be doing fine without me, I countered. 3 generations under one roof, isn't that what Diane called it? Michael was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally he said, I didn't realize you felt this way. You didn't ask. Another silence. The kids will want to see you before you leave. I'll finish Emma's jewelry box tomorrow, I said. I can drop it by Friday after school? Fine. His tone was clipped now. Friday. After hanging up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, not working, just thinking. Had I been unfair to Michael? Was I overreacting to changes that were natural in families? Margaret would have known. She always had better instincts about people's motivations. Friday afternoon came quickly. I'd spent the intervening days getting ready for my trip, cleaning the house, arranging for my neighbor Ted to check on things while I was gone. The jewelry box for Emma was finished, polished to a warm glow, lined with velvet I'd ordered special. I'd carved her name into the lid, the letters flowing into a design of vines and leaves. As I pulled into Michael's driveway, I noticed moving boxes stacked on the front porch. They were really doing it, moving quickly. I wondered if they'd planned this all along, waiting until the announcement party to tell me. Emma opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up. Grandpa! She threw her arms around me, and for a moment everything felt normal again. She smelled like teenage shampoo and bubblegum, her long hair tickling my face as she hugged me. Hey, Squirt, I said, using my old nickname for her. Heard you might be moving. She pulled back, her expression clouding. Yeah, it's weird. They just told us last weekend. I don't want to change schools, but Mom says the new district is better. So the children had been kept in the dark, too. Interesting. Where's your brother? I asked, stepping inside. Soccer practice. Mom's picking him up. She glanced toward the kitchen. Grandma Diane is here, though. Grandma Diane. The title hit like a physical blow. Actually, I brought something for you, I said, presenting the wrapped jewelry box. Early birthday present. Her eyes widened. Can I open it now? That's the idea. She tore into the paper, gasping when she saw the wooden box with her name carved into it. Grandpa, it's beautiful. Made it in my workshop, I said, pride warming my chest. Thought you could keep your special things in it. I love it. She hugged me again, then ran her fingers over the carving. Did you do this by hand? Every letter, I confirmed. Just like the one I made for your grandmother on our 30th anniversary. Emma's face grew serious. I remember that box. Mom keeps it in her closet now. That surprised me. Margaret's jewelry box had been on our dresser for years. After she died, I'd assumed Michael had kept it with her other personal effects. Does she use it? I asked casually. Emma glanced toward the kitchen, lowering her voice. No, Grandma Diane told her it was old-fashioned. Said Mom should get a proper jewelry armoire instead. Something cold settled in my stomach. Before I could respond, Diane appeared in the doorway, a glass of wine in her hand, despite it being only 4 p.m. Bill, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. What a surprise. Not really, I replied evenly. I told Michael I'd be bringing Emma's gift today. Of course. She glanced at the jewelry box in Emma's hands. Found it too rustic. Emma clutched the box closer. I think it's perfect. Well, you always did have unique taste, dear, Diane said with a little laugh. She turned to me. Michael mentioned you're going on a trip? To Arizona, I confirmed. Old friend lives there. How lovely for you. Her tone suggested she found it anything but. It's so important for people our age to stay active. Prevents cognitive decline, Emma frowned. Grandpa doesn't have cognitive decline. Of course not, dear, Diane said patronizingly. I'm just saying it's good preventative care. Like how your mother and I do those memory puzzles together. Memory puzzles? Something clicked in my mind. The change in how Stephanie addressed me at the dinner, the careful way Michael had been speaking to me lately, repeating things unnecessarily. Were they talking about my mental capacity behind my back? I'm managing just fine, I said stiffly. Been balancing my own checkbook for 50 years without help. Diane gave me a look of such practiced sympathy, it made my teeth clench. Of course you are. But everyone needs a little help eventually. Bill, that's why family needs to stick together. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Stephanie walked in with Jacob. The boy's face lit up when he saw me. Grandpa, did you bring cookies? I knelt to hug him, feeling the solid warmth of his small body against mine. Not today, sport. But I'll make you a double batch when I get back from my trip. Trip? He looked confused. Where are you going? Arizona, I said. To visit my friend Richard. When will you be back? I glanced up at Stephanie, who was watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. 2 weeks or so. But that's forever, Jacob protested. It'll go by quick, I assured him, tousling his hair. And when I get back, maybe we can go fishing if your parents say it's okay. Jacob looked up at his mother. Can we, Mom, please? Stephanie hesitated, her eyes flicking to Diane. We'll see. You'll be settled in the new house by then, and I'm not sure what the schedule will look like. There's a lake near the new house, Diane interjected smoothly. I've already looked into fishing permits. Maybe we could all go together. Make it a family outing. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. That sounds nice, I lied. Where exactly is this new house? Greenbrier Estates, Stephanie said. It's about 50 minutes from here, closer to the private school we're considering for the kids. 50 minutes. Almost exactly the same distance Diane had mentioned at the dinner party. Far enough to make casual visits difficult, close enough to claim I was still welcome any time. Fancy neighborhood, I commented. Must be expensive. We're pooling resources, Stephanie said, an edge to her voice. It makes financial sense for all of us. I'm sure it does. I checked my watch. I should get going. Got packing to finish before my flight tomorrow. Emma clutched her jewelry box. But you just got here. I know, Squirt, but I'll be back before you know it. I hugged her again, then Jacob. You two be good, okay? Help with the move. Jacob tugged at my sleeve. Can you make us birdhouses for the new yard, like you did for the old one? If your parents want them. Sure, of course we do, Stephanie said quickly. But I caught the glance she exchanged with Diane. The kids love your woodworking. As I headed for the door, Diane followed me. Bill, before you go, I've been meaning to ask you something. I paused on the porch, noticing more boxes had appeared. They were moving fast. Too fast for this to be a recent decision. What's that? She lowered her voice, glancing back to make sure we were alone. Have you given any thought to what you'll do with your house? It's really too large for one person, especially at your age. My age, I repeated flatly. You know what I mean, she said with a dismissive wave. Safety concerns, fall risks, maintenance issues. My financial advisor specializes in helping seniors downsize. He could get you top dollar, especially in this market. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about Diane inserting herself into my family. This was about assets, property, money. I'm not selling my house, I said firmly. Not now, perhaps, she conceded, but eventually you'll need to be practical. The stairs, the upkeep, it's a lot for someone alone. I managed just fine, her smile was thin. For now, but Michael and Stephanie worry. They've talked about it quite a bit, actually. Had they? Or was this Diane planting seeds, creating a narrative where I was becoming incapable, where decisions needed to be made for me rather than by me? I appreciate their concern, I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. But my house is my business. Family is everyone's business, Bill. We all want what's best for you. As I drove home, Diane's words echoed in my mind. We all want what's best for you. Not with me, but for me, as if I were a child or an invalid, incapable of determining my own best interests. Had Michael and Stephanie really been discussing my living situation? Or was Diane manipulating everyone, positioning herself as the concerned caretaker, while isolating me from my family? That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to my office, pulling out the file of financial documents I kept in the desk drawer. My will, drawn up after Margaret died, left everything to Michael. The house, the savings, Margaret's life insurance money I'd never touched. Nearly $800,000 in total, not counting the house value. Michael had never asked about my finances, had never shown interest in my estate planning. But now I wondered, had Diane? The trip to Arizona suddenly felt like running away. If I left now, what would I come back to? How much more influence would Diane gain in my absence? I made a decision. First thing Monday, I would call my lawyer to update my will. Not to disinherit Michael, but to protect my assets with a trust that couldn't be accessed until the grandchildren were older. Just in case. Saturday morning, I was finishing my packing when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Michael's car in the driveway. Surprised, I opened the door to find him standing there. Looking uncomfortable. Wasn't expecting you, I said, stepping back to let him in. Didn't want you to leave without saying goodbye. He followed me into the living room, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time. Place looks good. Still keeping it up, I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. No fall risks or maintenance issues yet. Michael frowned. What? Nothing. I gestured to the couch. Want coffee before I head to the airport? He shook his head. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Here it comes, I thought. The conversation Diane had primed about my house, my finances, my inability to care for myself. Diane came to me with some concerns, he began, and my stomach tightened. About your reaction to the move. Did she now? She thinks you feel left out, that we've been inconsiderate. He shifted uncomfortably. And maybe she's right. We should have discussed the new living arrangement with you earlier. Not what I was expecting. Would it have changed anything if you had? Probably not, he admitted. The decision makes sense for us financially and practically. But we could have been more sensitive about how we presented it. I studied my son's face, looking for signs of the manipulation I suspected. But all I saw was awkward contrition, the same expression he'd worn as a teenager after breaking curfew. It's your life, I said finally. Your family, your decisions, and your family too, Dad. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. That's what I came to say. We want you to be part of this. We're setting up a room for you at the new house. Not a guest room, your room, with space for your things, your books. Diane's idea. I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Actually, yes. Michael looked surprised at my tone. She specifically suggested it. Said we needed to make sure you felt welcome, that you had your own space. That didn't track with the Diane I'd encountered, unless this was part of a longer game. Get me comfortable with the idea of having my room at their house, then suggest I didn't need my own house anymore. Then offer to help with selling it. That's thoughtful, I said carefully. So you'll come visit when you get back from Arizona, see the new place? Of course. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it. After Michael left, I sat in my living room for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. Was I being paranoid? Was Diane genuinely trying to include me, and I was seeing ulterior motives where none existed? Or was I being skillfully manipulated, the target of a long con designed to separate me from my assets and isolate me from my family? As I headed to the airport, these questions churned in my mind. Arizona would give me distance, perspective. Maybe Richard, with his outsider's viewpoint, could help me see the situation more clearly. The desert air hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane in Phoenix. Dry hot, nothing like the Virginia humidity I was used to. Richard waited by baggage claim, leaner than I remembered but with the same easy smile. Bill Harrison, you old coot. He hugged me, pounding my back. Good to see you in the flesh. Likewise, I said, genuinely glad to see my friend. Thanks for having me. My pleasure. Been too quiet around here anyway. Richard's house was a single-story adobe-style home in a 55-plus community outside Phoenix. No stairs, wide doorways, grab bars in the bathrooms. Designed for aging bodies, but tastefully so. Nice place, I commented as he showed me to the guest room. Practical, he corrected. After Diana's stroke, I learned quick what matters in a house when mobility becomes an issue. We settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few days. Morning coffee on the patio, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold. Afternoons exploring local sites or playing cards with Richard's neighbors. Evenings with a beer on the back porch, talking about everything and nothing. It was during one of these evening sessions that I finally told Richard the full story. About Diane, about the dinner party, about my suspicions regarding her intentions. So you think she's after your money? Richard asked, taking a pull from his beer. I think she's positioning herself to influence decisions about my future, I clarified. The house, my finances, my relationship with the grandkids. Richard nodded slowly. You could be right. Or she could just be a controlling personality who wants to be the family matriarch. Either way, I'm being pushed aside. Have you talked to Michael directly about your concerns? I shook my head. How do I do that without sounding paranoid? Hey, son, I think your mother-in-law is trying to get her hands on my money and turn my grandkids against me. Maybe not in those words, Richard chuckled. Then more seriously. But you need to have the conversation. Clear the air. I wasn't convinced. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm seeing problems that aren't there? Then you apologize and move on. But what if you're right? On my 5th day in Arizona, Michael called. His voice sounded strained. Dad, when are you coming home? Not for another week at least, I said. Why? There's been an incident with Emma. My heart lurched. What kind of incident? She got into a huge fight with Mom and Diane about the move. Locked herself in her room, refusing to pack. He sighed heavily. She keeps saying she wants to talk to you. That you're the only one who understands. Pride and worry battled in my chest. Put her on the phone. She's not here right now. She's staying at a friend's house, but she'll be back tomorrow. Could you call then? Of course. After hanging up, I sat on Richard's patio, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Something felt off about the conversation. Why would Emma wait until tomorrow to talk to me? Why not call me directly on my cell phone, which she had the number for? That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying and checked my email. There was a new message from an address I didn't recognize. Grandpa, don't believe what they're telling you about me. I didn't run away or go to a friend's house. Grandma Diane took my phone after I heard her talking to Mom about selling your house. She said you were declining and needed managed care. When I tried to defend you, she said I was being disrespectful. Dad doesn't know I'm emailing you from the school computer lab. Please come home. Something weird is happening. Love, Emma. My hands shook as I read the email twice more. Declining. Managed care. The very narrative I'd feared was being constructed in my absence. I booked a flight home for the next morning. Richard drove me to the airport, concern etched on his face. You sure about this, Bill? Could be teenage dramatics. Emma doesn't do dramatics, I said firmly. If she says something's wrong, something's wrong. The flight felt interminable. By the time I landed in Virginia, it was late afternoon. I took a cab straight to Michael's house, my suitcase still in hand. The house was a hive of activity when I arrived. Moving trucks in the driveway, boxes everywhere. Stephanie saw me first, her eyes widening in surprise. Bill, we weren't expecting you until next week. Where's Emma? I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. At soccer practice, Stephanie said, exchanging a glance with Diane, who had appeared in the doorway. Michael's picking her up now. That's funny, I said, pulling out my phone, because I got an email from her yesterday saying her phone was taken away and she was being kept home. Diane stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. Bill, there was no email. Emma's been at school and activities all week. I'm afraid this is exactly what we've been worried about. Worried about what? I demanded. Stephanie placed a gentle hand on my arm. Memory issues, Bill, confusion. Michael's noticed it too. Has he? I pulled away from her touch. Or have you and Diane been telling him you've noticed it? Diane's expression hardened slightly. I think you need to sit down, Bill. You're clearly agitated after your trip. I'm not sitting anywhere until I see Emma. Fine. Stephanie sighed. They should be home any minute. But Bill, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your living situation. These confusions, these accusations, they're concerning. As if on cue, Michael's car pulled into the driveway. Emma jumped out before it had fully stopped, running toward me. Grandpa, she threw her arms around me. You got my email. Stephanie and Diane exchanged looks of genuine surprise. So the email had been real. What's going on? Michael asked, approaching more slowly. Dad, you're back early. Emma reached out to me, I said, keeping an arm around my granddaughter's shoulders. Said some concerning things were happening here. Michael looked confused. What things? Emma straightened her spine. I heard Grandma Diane and Mum talking about selling Grandpa's house and putting him in a care facility. They said he was declining and needed to be managed. That's ridiculous, Diane snapped. Emma clearly misheard a private adult conversation. Did I? Emma challenged. Then why did you take my phone when I confronted you about it? Why did you tell Dad I was being disrespectful when I was just standing up for Grandpa? All eyes turned to Diane, whose composure slipped for an instant before she recovered. I was simply trying to minimize drama during an already stressful moving period. Michael looked between his daughter and mother-in-law, uncertainty clear on his face. Mom, did you really talk about selling Dad's house? Stephanie hesitated. We were discussing options, Michael, for the future. You've said yourself that you worry about him living alone. Discussing options without me, I said quietly. About my house, my life? It wasn't like that, Stephanie protested. What was it like then? I asked. Enlighten me. The tension was broken by Jacob running out from the house. Grandpa's back. Can we have cookies now? Before anyone could respond, Emma spoke up again. There's more. They've been going through Grandpa's financial papers. I saw them on Mom's desk with notes all over them. Diane let out an exasperated sigh. This is absurd. The girl is making things up for attention. Am I? Emma pulled her phone from her pocket, apparently reclaimed at some point. Because I took pictures. She swiped through her phone and held it up. There on the screen was a clear image of what appeared to be my bank statements. Investment summaries and property tax records spread across a desk, with handwritten notes in the margins. Where did you get those? I asked, my voice barely audible. From your desk drawer, I imagine, Diane said dismissively. Michael has a key to your house for emergencies. All eyes turned to Michael, who had the grace to look ashamed. Dad, I can explain. But before he could, the tension finally snapped. Maybe it was the jet lag. Maybe it was the betrayal. Maybe it was weeks of suspicion finally confirmed. Whatever the cause, something in me broke loose. You went through my private papers. My voice rose. You gave copies to them to analyze. Behind my back? Dad, calm down, Michael urged, stepping between me and the women. Your blood pressure, don't tell me to calm down. You've been conspiring against me, all of you. No one is conspiring against you, Diane said smoothly. We're concerned family members trying to plan responsibly. Plan for what? I demanded. My decline, my death, how quickly you can get your hands on my assets. That's unfair, Stephanie protested. Unfair. You want to know what's unfair? Being treated like I'm incompetent, being discussed like I'm already gone. Having my own son spy on me for his wife and mother-in-law. Dad, that's enough, Michael said sharply. How you're upset and not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I counted. Ever since she moved in, I jabbed a finger toward Diane. Things have changed. You've changed. Don't blame Diane for problems that were already there, Michael snapped. She's just trying to help. Help herself, maybe. To my house, my money, my place in this family. Michael's face hardened. You need to leave now before you say something else you'll regret. Michael. Emma protested. He's right. You know he is. Stay out of this, Emma, Stephanie warned. For this is adult business. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for, now standing against me, defending the very people who were trying to push me aside. You know what? I said quietly. You're right. I should leave. I turned to go, but Emma grabbed my arm. No, Grandpa. Don't let them win. Diane stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Emma's shoulder. Let your grandfather go, Emma. He needs time to cool down. Something about her patronizing tone, her presumptuous touch on my granddaughter. The smug certainty that she'd won. It was too much. I spun around. Take your hands off my granddaughter. Bill, you're being irrational, Diane said calmly, maintaining her grip on Emma. Let her go. Diane's smile was condescending. See what I mean? Agitation, mood swings, classic signs of... Before she could finish, I stepped forward, my face inches from hers. If you say cognitive decline one more time, I swear to God, and that's when it happened. Michael grabbed my shoulder, roughly pulling me back from Diane. Don't threaten her, he shouted. What's wrong with you? I stared at my son's hand on me, at the anger in his eyes, at the stranger he'd become under Diane's influence. And something inside me, some last restraint, simply snapped. What's wrong with me? I roared. You're the one who's been manipulated like a puppet. You're so busy trying to please your wife and her mother that you can't see what they're doing to this family, to your children, to me. That's enough! Michael's face was red with anger now. No, it's not enough. You went behind my back, Michael. You stole my financial information. You've been planning to take my house, my independence, my dignity. And for what? To please them? Michael stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You need help, Dad, professional help. And if you won't get it voluntarily... Before he could finish, I felt a spray of moisture hit my face. Michael had spat at me. My own son spat in my face, his saliva running down my cheek in full view of everyone. The world seemed to stop. Emma gasped. Jacob started crying. But what happened next was worse than the spit itself. Stephanie and Diane began to applaud. Slow, deliberate claps. "It's about time," Diane said, smiling at Michael like he'd done something praiseworthy. "Someone needed to put him in his place." Stephanie nodded. "He can't talk to us that way in our house." I stood frozen, spit dripping down my face, staring at my son. He looked momentarily shocked by his own action. Then his expression hardened again. "Leave," he said quietly. "Just leave." With as much dignity as I could muster, I wiped my face with my sleeve, turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Emma calling my name, heard Jacob's confused questions, heard Diane's voice already spinning the narrative of what had just happened. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I had, they might have seen me break. I walked to the end of the street before calling a cab. As I waited, sitting on someone's garden wall, the full weight of what had happened settled over me. My son had spat in my face, and his wife and mother-in-law had applauded. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just about control or influence. This was war, and I was just beginning to fight back. The cab dropped me at a motel just off the highway. Nothing fancy, just a clean bed and a door that locked. I'd left my suitcase in Michael's driveway in my hurry to escape, so all I had were the clothes on my back and my wallet. In the harsh fluorescent light of the motel bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My cheek still felt sticky where Michael's spit had landed. I washed my face again and again, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I called Richard that night, my voice breaking as I told him what had happened. "Jesus, Bill," he said when I finished. "That's assault. You could press charges against my own son." The thought made me sick. "I can't do that." "Then what's your plan?" "You can't just let this go." I stared at the ceiling, watching the headlights of passing cars create moving shadows. "I don't know yet. But I'm done being a doormat." Sleep wouldn't come. Around 3 a.m., I got up and started making notes on the motel pad. Everything I'd observed, every suspicious comment, every strange behavior. Looking at it all together, a pattern emerged that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just about Diane manipulating her way into the family. This was a systematic campaign to isolate me, question my competence, and gain control of my assets. The next morning, I took a cab to my house. The familiar sight of my porch, my garden, the oak arbor I'd built, it should have brought comfort. Instead, it felt vulnerable, exposed. They had a key. They'd been going through my papers. What else had they accessed without my knowledge? I changed the locks first thing. The locksmith, a young guy with tattoos up his arms, didn't ask questions, just did the job and handed me the new keys. "Nobody else gets copies," I told him, pressing an extra tip into his hand. "Nobody." "Yes, sir." "Your house, your keys. Simple as that. My house, my keys. My life." Inside, I went straight to my office. The desk drawer where I kept financial documents was slightly ajar, confirming what Emma had revealed. I pulled everything out, spreading the papers across the desk, trying to determine what might be missing. Nothing obvious, but they'd had plenty of time to make copies, as Emma's photos had shown. My computer showed recent logins when I'd been in Arizona. They'd accessed my email too. How long had this been going on? How much did they know about my finances, my correspondence, my private thoughts? I called my bank first, changing passwords and setting up two-factor authentication. Then my investment accounts. Then my email. Each call, each change of password felt like rebuilding a wall that had been breached. By noon, I was exhausted but not finished. My legal situation needed attention. I called Jason Hargrove, my attorney since Margaret's passing, and scheduled an immediate appointment. "Bring everything you have," he said, his voice grave after I explained the situation. "Bank statements, property deeds, powers of attorney, especially powers of attorney." 2 hours later, I sat in Jason's office, watching his face darken as he reviewed the documents I'd brought and listened to my full story. "Bill," he said finally, removing his glasses, "this is elder abuse, financial exploitation. There are laws against this." "They haven't actually taken anything yet," I pointed out. "Attempted exploitation is still a crime, and emotional abuse is abuse." He leaned forward. "Have you granted anyone power of attorney?" I shook my head. "Margaret was my healthcare proxy, but after she died, I never updated it." "Small blessing," Jason muttered. "They would have used it against you." He helped me draft a new will that afternoon, naming Emma as my heir once she turned 25, with a separate trust for Jacob, and nothing, explicitly nothing, for Michael or Stephanie. We also prepared a healthcare directive, naming Jason as my proxy, with strict instructions that neither Michael nor anyone in his household should have decision-making authority over my care. "What about criminal charges?" Jason asked as we finalized the documents. "Against Michael? I can't. The memory of teaching him to ride a bike, of walking him down the aisle at his wedding, still cut too deep. Think about it," Jason advised. "At minimum, we should file for a restraining order. What he did constitutes assault." I left Jason's office with a stack of legal documents and a heaviness in my heart. This wasn't how I'd imagined spending my retirement years, changing locks, updating wills, contemplating restraining orders against my own son. Back home, I found a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. There was a voicemail. "Grandpa, it's Emma. I'm using my friend Zoe's phone. They took mine away again after you left. Things are really bad here. Dad and Mom are fighting. Grandma Diane keeps saying you're unstable and dangerous. Jacob's scared. Can you please call me back? I don't know what to do." My heart raced as I called the number back. Emma answered on the first ring. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. What about you and Jacob? Are you safe?" She lowered her voice. "We're at the new house now. They rushed the move after what happened. Dad's acting weird, like he feels guilty but won't admit it. Mom and Grandma Diane keep whispering together. I heard them talking about getting a court order or something." A chill ran through me. "What kind of court order?" "I don't know exactly. Something about capacity evaluation? Guardianship?" I didn't hear everything. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take legal control of my decisions, my finances, my life. Emma, listen carefully. "Can you and Jacob get to my house after school tomorrow? Use Zoe's phone if you need to call a cab. I'll pay for it." "I think so. Why?" "There are some things you need to know. Documents I want to show you." After hanging up, I called Jason back. "They're planning to file for guardianship," I told him. "To have me declared incompetent." His response was immediate. "Not without a fight, they're not. I'm filing our counter-petition first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to need medical documentation of your cognitive capacity. Whatever it takes," I agreed. That night I couldn't sleep again. I sat on my back porch until dawn, watching the stars fade and thinking about Margaret. What would she have done in my position? She wouldn't have let it get this far, that's for sure. She would have seen through Diane from day one, would have protected our family from her influence. "I'm trying, Mags," I whispered into the pre-dawn chill. "I'm trying to fight back." The next day was a flurry of activity. I visited my primary care doctor for a cognitive assessment, which I passed with flying colors. "Better than most patients 20 years younger," Dr. Patterson noted on my chart. I had Jason file emergency motions to block any guardianship attempts. I withdrew half my savings and opened new accounts at different banks, leaving just enough in the original accounts to avoid triggering fraud alerts. By the time Emma and Jacob arrived after school, I was exhausted but prepared. They looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than I remembered. Jacob ran straight into my arms. "Grandpa, are you still mad at Dad?" he asked. His small face creased with worry. "It's complicated, buddy," I said, hugging him tight, "but I'm not mad at you. Never at you." Emma, more perceptive at 16, studied my face. "You changed the locks." "Had to." She nodded, understanding without explanation. "So what did you want to show us?" I spread the documents on the kitchen table, copies of my new will, the healthcare directive, bank statements showing unusual access patterns that coincided with Michael's visits, and printed emails I'd recovered from my deleted folder. Exchanges between Diane and Stephanie, discussing my declining condition and the need for intervention. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, I explained, keeping my voice calm for Jacob's sake. To take control of my house, my money, my life decisions. Emma's face hardened with each document she examined. I knew it. I knew Grandma Diane was behind this. "Not just her," I said gently. "Your parents are involved too." Jacob looked confused. "But why would they do that? Don't they love you anymore?" The question, so simple and devastating, nearly broke me. "They love what they think I can give them," I said carefully. "But that's not the same as loving me. What happens now?" Emma asked, her young face too serious for her age. "Now we wait. My lawyer has filed papers to protect me legally. But I wanted you both to know the truth, in case they try to tell you I'm confused or making things up. We know you're not crazy, Grandpa, Jacob said fiercely. You're the smartest person I know. His unwavering faith brought the first smile to my face in days. Thanks, buddy. After I sent them home with strict instructions to act normal and not mention their visit, I sat alone in my kitchen, the documents still spread across the table. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence heavier. The next morning, the storm broke. Michael called, his voice cold and formal. We need to talk now, at our house. I have nothing to say to you, I replied. Fine, then I'll say it here. We're filing for emergency guardianship today. Dr. Levinson has agreed to testify about your declining mental state. Dr. Levinson? I'd never heard the name before. What doctor is that? A geriatric specialist. He's reviewed your case. Without examining me? That's malpractice. Michael's voice hardened. He's reviewed the documentation we provided. The paranoid accusations. The aggressive behavior. The confusion about events and times. You mean the lies Diane has been spreading? See? That's exactly the paranoia I'm talking about. Blaming Diane for everything. Creating conspiracy theories. I've had a full cognitive assessment, I interrupted. Yesterday. With Dr. Patterson, my physician of 20 years. Passed with flying colors. And my lawyer has already filed to block any guardianship attempts. The silence on the other end was satisfying. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice tight. You've hired a lawyer? Should I not have defended myself? Another pause. This isn't over. You need help, whether you recognize it or not. The only help I need is for you to stay away from me and my property, which you've been illegally accessing. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. The legal battle that followed was ugly. Their petition for guardianship painted me as a rapidly declining old man, paranoid and aggressive, unable to manage my affairs. My counterpetition included the cognitive assessment, financial records showing their unauthorized access, and affidavits from neighbors and friends attesting to my continued competence. 3 weeks into the legal fight, I received an unexpected visitor. Michael's friend Stephen, whom I'd known since the boys were in high school together, stood awkwardly on my porch. Mr. Harrison, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I need to talk to you about something. I let him in cautiously, staying near the door. What about? Stephen sank onto my couch, looking miserable. I can't keep quiet anymore. It's eating me up. What is? I know what they've been doing to you. Michael told me parts, but I've overheard more. At their housewarming last weekend, my heart raced. What did you hear? Diane. She was talking to her financial advisor when she thought nobody was listening. Going over your assets, planning how to transition them after the guardianship was approved. He looked up, finally meeting my gaze. She mentioned selling your house immediately, liquidating your investments. She said, and I quote, once the old man is declared incompetent, we'll move fast before anyone starts asking questions. The confirmation of my worst fears should have devastated me. Instead, it brought a strange calm. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't confused. I'd been right all along. Will you testify to that? I asked quietly. Stephen hesitated, then nodded. It's not right what they're doing. Michael's changed since Diane moved in. We've all seen it. His testimony proved to be the turning point. The judge, already skeptical of their rushed guardianship petition, ordered a full hearing with all parties present. That hearing was scheduled for exactly 1 month after Michael spat in my face. I spent that month preparing meticulously with Jason. We gathered bank records, phone records, witness statements. We compiled a timeline of Diane's integration into the family and the corresponding changes in Michael and Stephanie's behavior toward me. We documented every unauthorized access, every manipulation, every lie. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the funeral one, but a newer one I'd bought for Emma's honor roll ceremony last year. I polished my shoes, trimmed my mustache, made sure every hair was in place. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me look like the decrepit old man they'd described in their petition. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate almost. Michael, Stephanie, and Diane sat on one side with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. I sat on the other with Jason. No one from Michael's side would meet my eyes. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the documents before speaking. I've rarely seen a guardianship case with such contradictory evidence, she began. On one hand, I have detailed allegations of cognitive decline, paranoia, and inability to manage affairs. On the other, I have equally detailed medical documentation showing no such decline, along with troubling evidence of what appears to be a systematic attempt to isolate and control Mr. Harrison. She turned her gaze to Michael. Mr. Harrison the younger, would you care to explain why you accessed your father's financial records without his knowledge or consent? Michael shifted uncomfortably. I was concerned about his ability to manage his finances. It was done out of care, not malice. And yet you didn't discuss these concerns with him directly? He would have denied any problems. As is his right, the judge noted dryly. Being elderly is not the same as being incompetent, Mr. Harrison. She turned to me next. Mr. Harrison, the elder, these are serious counter-allegations you've made against your son and his family. Do you truly believe they've been conspiring to have you declared incompetent for financial gain? I looked directly at Michael for the first time since entering the courtroom. His eyes dropped to the table. Your Honor, I believe my son's actions were initially guided by concern, however misplaced. But I also believe that concern was weaponized by others who saw an opportunity. I glanced at Diane. I have witness testimony confirming plans to liquidate my assets immediately upon gaining guardianship. Plans made without any consideration for my wishes or needs. The judge nodded, then turned to Stephen, who sat nervously in the gallery. After hearing his testimony about the conversation he'd overheard, the judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Livingston, she addressed Diane directly. Would you care to explain these statements? Diane's composure slipped for just a moment before she recovered. That conversation has been taken entirely out of context. Your Honor, we were discussing hypothetical financial planning for the entire family, including how to manage Mr. Harrison's assets responsibly if he were to become incapacitated in the future. A hypothetical that coincidentally aligned with an active guardianship petition? The judge's skepticism was palpable. The rest of the hearing unfolded like a well-scripted play. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, dismantled the facade Michael and his family had constructed. By the time Jason presented my clean cognitive assessment and documentation of the unauthorized access to my accounts, even Michael's lawyer looked defeated. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Petition for guardianship denied. Counter-petition for protective order granted. She fixed Michael with a stern gaze. Mr. Harrison, I strongly suggest you return any keys or access credentials to your father's property immediately. Any further unauthorized access could result in criminal charges. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught Michael's eye. For a brief moment, I saw something there. Regret, shame, the ghost of the son I'd raised. Then Diane touched his arm and the connection broke. Outside, in the bright Virginia sunlight, Jason clapped my shoulder. Congratulations, Bill, clear victory. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow, empty. I'd won the legal battle but lost my son. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, a car pulled into my driveway. Emma stepped out alone. Dad dropped me off, she explained, climbing the steps. He's waiting down the street. He knows he's not supposed to be on my property, I said. He knows. She sat beside me on the porch swing. Grandpa, he's a mess. He and Mom have been fighting non-stop. Grandma Diane left yesterday. Said she's going to stay with her sister for a while. I absorbed this information silently. Dad wanted me to give you this. She handed me an envelope. He said to tell you he's sorry, but he knows that's not enough. Inside was a letter, written in Michael's careful hand. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. What I did to you is unforgivable. The spit, the accusations, the betrayal, all of it. I let myself be convinced that I was acting in your best interest, when in reality I was just taking the easy path, the path of least resistance against two determined women. I've lost your trust, your respect, and possibly your love. I accept that consequence. But please don't punish Emma and Jacob for my failures. They need their grandfather. They need the wisdom and kindness that I foolishly rejected. The new keys to your house are enclosed. I've deleted any copies of your documents from my computer. I've closed the joint account Diane convinced us to open with your information. I don't know if we can ever repair what I've broken, but I want you to know that I'm trying to find my way back to being the son you raised, the man I was before I let greed and manipulation cloud my judgment. With deepest regret, Michael, 2 small keys fell from the envelope into my palm. I closed my fingers around them, feeling their weight. Emma watched me anxiously. "Are you still going to let us visit?" "Of course," I said immediately. "This was never about you or Jacob. My door is always open to both of you." "And Dad?" "Eventually, I mean." I looked out at the darkening sky, thinking of all that had happened, all that had been lost and found again. "Eventually," I said finally. "Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually." She hugged me tightly. "That's all he's hoping for." After Emma left, I sat in the growing darkness, Michael's letter in my hands. The breach between us was deep, perhaps too deep to ever fully heal. But family is complicated that way. The same bonds that can be stretched by betrayal can sometimes, with work, with time, with forgiveness, begin to pull back together again. 2 months later, I invited Emma and Jacob for the weekend. Michael dropped them off, staying in the car as they ran up to my porch. I raised my hand in acknowledgement. He returned the gesture, a small moment of connection across the divide. That night, as the kids slept upstairs in the rooms I'd prepared for them, I sat at my kitchen table writing in a journal I'd started keeping since the court hearing. "Family isn't always what we expect it to be," I wrote. "Sometimes it breaks apart, sometimes it reforms in new ways. The important thing is to know your own worth, to stand your ground when necessary, and to leave the door open just a crack for reconciliation, not because it's owed, but because healing serves us better than permanent wounds." Margaret would have understood this. She always said love wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about how you repair them afterward. I closed the journal thinking about the road ahead. It wouldn't be easy. Trust once shattered doesn't reassemble without showing its cracks. But I was willing to try for Emma and Jacob's sake. Maybe someday for Michael's sake too. In the end, that's the lesson I learned from this whole painful chapter. You can love someone deeply and still need to protect yourself from them. You can forgive without forgetting. You can set boundaries without closing doors permanently. And sometimes, walking away isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a different one. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments how you would rate this story from 0 to 10. Your feedback helps me create more content you'll enjoy. Thank you for listening.